Hello, everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm Pastor Siri. I'm a Lutheran pastor, but also a spiritual seeker. And today I really want to talk about religion or spirituality and politics. Take a listen. One of the things I hear a lot as a pastor when I get up and I talk about issues that are going on in our country or certain people who really need to be heard and understood and have compassion and empathy extended to them, inevitably someone will come up to me and go, "Pastor Siri, you really shouldn't be political in church. This is a place to talk about spiritual and religious things, not politics." Well, unfortunately, that's not exactly true. You see, part of the problem, the premise that we begin with, is we begin with this understanding that religion and politics are private. They don't affect anyone else, and no one should talk about them. And this is an old idea that's been around in the United States for a long time. And it basically comes from this concept that your religion and politics is very private. That's true, very personal. It affects you deeply. And that people have different opinions and we can't really get along and agree. And it's just going to make everybody upset. So there's a basic fundamental flaw with that. Because we don't know how to talk to each other in order to be polite in society, we basically don't. So we're really not allowing ourselves the opportunity to grow or to learn or to correct beliefs we might have that could be ignorant or bad. One of the things that I do is teach and talk about respectful conversations. And this is a really simple premise. It's this concept that whenever you're in a conversation where all of a sudden the subject matter gets charged and people feel like their emotions heightened, literally, if you feel like a belief is being attacked, your brain feels that as like close to a physical attack. So that's real. We don't want to belittle that. But by taking a step back and engaging in that conversation from the point of view of your experience, saying, well, I got to tell you, in my life experience, I have only known immigrants that have been super helpful and safe and wonderful and loving to the community and enriching. Or, something like, I read a book, I listened to a podcast, and it really opened my eyes and taught me these things that I had not thought of before on this particular issue. So that can really take the charge down, because what we want to do is immediately start accusing other people about, well, you're just one of those people and you're just like that and I can't believe you think that. And we get onto a very attack, defensive, and those two energies will absolutely shut down a conversation and make both people upset, and no one is able to learn in that space. Because you're basically eliminating any frontal lobe activity of thinking and processing and bringing everything back to fight or flight. So first things first is anytime we have a conversation regarding faith and regarding politics of any kind, is it's really good for us to learn and practice those skills of going, all right, I'm going to step back and I'm going to express myself from my experience and try to keep it at my experience. And then I'm also going to ask that person about their experience. I'm going to be curious about why they have their beliefs and assume that at the very core of it, there's something I can relate to or empathize with, meaning it may come down to a fear. And maybe that fear is unfounded, but most of us can understand being afraid and wanting to protect ourselves. So sometimes by just learning respectful conversations and being able to keep things on a level of what's my experience, what's your experience, we can find a way to actually have these conversations. But the other thing that's even bigger that I want to spend more time on is this concept that partisan politics, meaning the Republicans and the Democrats fighting with each other, is the same as politics, and that's not true. Politics is just the public sphere of people coming together and making decisions that affect the whole. And some of those decisions An average person may not notice a whole lot about how those decisions are made. But here's the thing. A lot of laws tend to affect the most marginalized people first. The people who are the most vulnerable with the least amount of power, the least amount of say, the least amount of money are usually the people that get hurt by laws first. And this may be housing, this may be hourly pay, this may be any sort of thing where somebody benefits to the harm of somebody else. And a whole bunch of us in the middle aren't benefiting and aren't really losing out. And so we just think that this is just a political issue we don't have to worry about. And when someone from this marginalized group begins to start talking about it and getting loud and saying, this is a problem, we have to talk about this, those of us who are unaffected have the privilege to say, it doesn't affect me. I don't get into politics. But that is not a very religious or spiritually mature position. From my perspective as a Christian, the way I see Jesus operating in the world is he has an unbelievable amount of empathy and compassion for all people and has the ability to see all of the systems that are in place politically, economically, and religiously for what they are. And the way he treats people is regardless of the labels that are put upon them, he sees them as a fellow human being in need of love and care and healing. And in the process, he calls out the systems as well that are doing harm to the person. So this idea that somehow spirituality is completely separate from the ongoing rest of the world is part of the problem that we have. That you could actually go to church on Sunday and talk about how much you love Jesus, and then you go the rest of the week and you work for a company or you enact policies that are deeply harmful to everyday people. In fact, that's what the prophets were railing about most. Micah, what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God? Tons of Isaiah passages that are saying, what is the sacrifice that God actually wants? What's the festival? You do all these great things on the holy day, and then the rest of the week there's no justice. You're abusing people. In our everyday world, we have to acknowledge that power structures are in place that are not perfectly just. They're not. And how do you know? We listen to the voices of the marginalized because they're the ones who are hurt first. And so we look at who has traditionally been marginalized. Women's voices, Black people, Indigenous people, new immigrants, single moms. An immature statement that it seems a lot of people have is this concept of, well, I got mine, so you figure out yours. I worked hard in life and I have a good life, so what's wrong with you? Why haven't you figured it out? And that is an inherently privileged position, one in which you are just fine all by yourself, and you don't have to worry about anyone else. But we are called, the premise of most faiths is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And loving is not just a feeling inside of liking your neighbor, but it's actually to create space to honor them and respect them as a human being and make sure you're creating a place and a world in which they can thrive. You don't have to like your neighbor. You don't have to really feel like you have much in common with your neighbor. But if you're constantly voting for things that are in your best interest that are going to hurt them, or you think, well, this politician wants to destroy these people, but I kind of like the cut of their jib. That's not looking at us as interconnected beings who are called to love each other, to work together, to be in an interconnected web of which we already are. We just don't really realize it. We need a place to create a place where all people are living and thriving, and any roadblocks that are in front of people from having a thriving world are dismantled. And just because it doesn't affect you doesn't mean it's not real. And here's the last thing that I want to say. There are issues that pastors like myself might be talking about on Sunday that 50 years ago would not have been seen as political at all. They would have just been stories that were affecting a certain population. But unfortunately, it feels like the rhetoric among many partisan leaders is more and more issues about human survival and treating certain people as human beings have been politicized, meaning that if you take a position that says, this person is a human being who deserves to live, suddenly people see you as this partisan versus this partisan. The other thing that I hear too that's right along this is that as a pastor, I will get up and talk about, the LGBTQ population and talk about Black Lives Matter and talk about immigrants and things like that, just from the lens of we need to have compassion and treat all people as human beings who deserve to thrive. And we need to listen to their stories because we don't know. Unless you're a part of that group or you identify in that way, chances are you don't actually know what you think you know. And so learning and listening and changing your mind for the sake of loving your neighbor is a deeply, deeply Christian thing to do. And somehow, by me saying that, I'm considered political and woke. If empathy and wanting other human beings to have a good life and trying to figure out policies that are invitational and kind and humane, if that makes me woke, then I'm the wokest freaking person on the planet, and I don't care what you think of me. I say all of this because the rhetoric in the world has done a number on us. As people of faith, it has made us afraid to know how to speak about issues with each other without everybody getting mad. It's made us afraid of being labeled in a certain way just because we have a belief. And it's also, I believe, kept us from listening to the very people who need us to listen. Our faith should affect our politics in that if I believe that all people are beloved children of God and that we have a responsibility to take care of each other, to take care of our neighbor, and that animals are also my neighbor, and the water and the land and the air and the trees are also my neighbor that I should love as myself, then it is part of my job to speak on behalf of those who don't have a voice. It is part of my job to make sure my neighbor's interests are being looked out for. It is part of my job to make sure that laws are ethical and fair and just for all people, not just for a few. That is how I take my faith into politics. So in summary, we should not be afraid to talk about the things that are important to us, but we do need to change the way we talk about them. And I'm going to be honest, we hardly ever see anyone doing that in a grown-up, mature way on television or on the internet. Most people are talking like a bunch of 13-year-olds yelling at each other and trying to one-up the other. It's not very helpful. There is a better way we can talk about these things. And two, if the laws that are passing in this country and in your county, in your state, aren't affecting you, awesome, you are coming from a place of privilege, but that does not excuse you from learning about what is happening and really listening to the voices of those people who are being affected. Because our spirituality and our faith, if we believe that they are to lead us to be mature, compassionate, courageous human beings, then that means stepping up and speaking for and standing alongside our neighbor. And that, my friends, is how spirituality and religion needs to be political if it has any integrity. I hope this was helpful for you. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, share, comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.